how to predict zones in Fortnite. I'm going to get straight to the chase here. Is there a 100% guaranteed way so that you know where every single zone is going to be before you know it? Outside of having the Storm Scout Sniper, the answer is no. However, you can predict where zones are going based off the previous zone's rotations, positioning on the map, and some other few things as well. So let's get into the kind of details of that. Now, all of this is an assumption based on what I've seen by studying the zones already, and some kind of common sense. So one main thing has to be true first, and that is that the zones are predetermined. So once the game starts, the zones are already determined at this point. We know this is true to an extent because the Storm Scout Sniper actually shows you where that next zone is already once you're in that previous zone. So in first zone, it'll show you where second zone is, second zone, it'll show you where third zone is, etc, etc, etc. So I'm pretty sure all zones are predetermined. If not, just the next zone that's coming ahead is predetermined. So on that assumption, why is that so important? Well, this allows us to start working backwards. So I want to kind of split this into two sections, up until fourth zone and then after fourth zone. So let's think about the fourth zone. Why does it matter if it's predetermined or not? So if we take a fourth zone that's on the edge of the map and start working back from there on, we'll be able to figure out where the other zones were relative to this. Well, if the fourth zone is right at the edge of the map here, you can see the third zone will also have to be pulling to the north side. The second zone will then also be pulling to this north side, and then this first zone will also be in this area as well. So working backwards, you can kind of see a pattern of where the zones will go. So if you think about it in the correct order, if you see a first zone that pulls completely to the edge of the map, chances are the second zone is also going to pull up to that direction. The third zone probably will, and potentially the fourth zone will too. Obviously, this is not an exact science. This does not happen all of the time, but this is a great indicator of why. But how does this not happen every time? Well, let's take a fourth zone that's not exactly on the edge. If the first zone pulls all the way north, the second zone can pull all the way north, the third zone can pull all the way north, however that fourth zone can still then pull to the complete south side of this zone. So this is why it's important to make the assumption that the zones are predetermined. Because if you see that first zone that pulls completely north or completely west, completely east, completely south, completely to one side, there's a larger percentage chance that the next zone is going to be completely to that side as well. This means that in your game you can position yourself further to that side and assume that you have to make that further rotate. Even if you make this further rotate and get relatively close to the center before that next zone appears, you're already in a pretty good position to rotate to the next zone anyway. So this assumption is nearly always good to make regardless of what the zone is. So let's get into a little bit more about positioning on the zone, and this is probably something that the majority of players out there know. If you've ever watched my videos, you will certainly know it. And that is obviously the closer you get to the center of the zone, the less distance you're going to have to rotate. This is particularly important for the third zone. Being in that dead center of the third zone will guarantee you get fourth zone and give you the shortest rotate into that zone. Now, center of every zone isn't necessarily where you want to be first, second, and third all of the time, because let's be real, there are other factors in the game as well. Storm Surge is a huge factor, and being center of first and second zone may mean that there are no teams rotating past you, which means you're not going to get any Storm Surge tags. Also may put you in an extremely congested area if you don't need Storm Surge tags in a game that's something like a Cash Cup or an Opens, which will just get you W keyed, and if you're trying to stay away from teams, this may not be the play. Center of third does seem to be pretty much a good idea. Remember, don't just look at the map and say, okay, we're going dead center here. You need to be aware of hills around you, POIs around you, and where teams are going to be rotating from as well. If there's a POI dead center, you got to remember there's going to be tons of players in this area, which means potentially you might not want to be dead center. You might want to take a little bit around the edge of the POI on a high layer, because this will get you away from more players, but also still give that ability to farm out the house. Hills are also very important, as I've already mentioned, because they'll give you way more Storm Surge tags, it'll give you rotates easier as well. So center of third is good to try and get that shortest distance and predict that next fourth zone. However, it's not everything. So what about the fifth zone? Is there a way that you can predict half in, half out fifth zone? Not that I've seen so far. It seems to be completely 50-50, as the name would suggest. Again, you can do your best to position yourself in a way that gives you the easiest rotate, which is usually on a high ground position, in particular in this meta where you only have bounce pads. It may be best to ensure that you stay on a high layer. Also, if you end up getting the zone, this gives you that height already before the moving zones. So try to stay in a high ground layer in the fourth zone and just cross your fingers, hope you get the fifth. So what about the moving zones? Is there a way to always determine where the moving zones go? As far as I've seen, no. People often say that they always go over a hill or over some sort of vertical elevation that makes you use your materials to go over that. But basically, if you look at the map, that kind of just happens everywhere anyway, so you're not necessarily always going to do that. What I would say is being aware of dead side of moving zones is extremely important, because if you look at guys like Stretch, who always seem to know where the zone is moving, a lot of the times this is just because he positions himself in a position that he can get to the dead side of moving zones easily. Once you're at the end of one moving zone, waiting for the next one to appear, it actually is useful to go a box or two deeper into the zone, as this will put you a little bit ahead of where more players are. This way, if you get another zone that pulls completely far ahead, you're going to be already ahead of the majority of the players who are behind you. Or if it pulls to your right or to your left, you can easily rotate to the dead side of the zone from here, and you're going to be absolutely fine, keeping away from those extra players. Another note about the verticality, it's always good to just ensure that you're aware of your surroundings and where those hills are. When you see the zone popping up, especially in trios, you should always have one player who pays attention to the hills. If it's going up a hill, if it's going down a hill, just ensure that you need to go up a layer, down a layer. Make sure you're not wasting too many mats being too high. This is definitely the job of your IGL, just to ensure that they keep you on a good layer. So the one guaranteed way, like everyone already knows, is the Storm Scout Sniper. So you can actually get the Storm Scout Sniper in tournaments, but it is very difficult. Within Hunter's Haven, there are 4 safe spawns that all have 150 gold in them, and the Storm Scout Sniper costs 500 gold total. So if you get lucky and get 2 or 4 of these, you're already going to have 350, which again is not enough, so you also need a bounty on top of this. So you're going to need a ton. Remember, you can't actually drop gold from player to player, so only one person has to get these 2 to get them. What's most likely is the teams who go Lazy Lake, for example, will be able to get it, because there's 2 NPCs that spawn here. Again, you get quite a lot of gold. However, if both NPCs spawn there, you're probably better off a lot of the times just upgrading your shotgun in one of the NPCs that are there. There are challenges that you can get from these NPCs around, which give you a ton of gold, and this can actually really get you close to that 500. So without doing any bounties, it's going to be really tough. However, this is probably viable in a cash cup or in the opens level tournament, where your top level teams are much better than the average team, where they can get bounties, get enough gold, grab that Storm Scout Sniper, and not only W key and be very aggressive, but at the same time they can actually know where the zones are going to. So overall, Storm Scout Sniper is amazing. Most of the time you're not going to be able to get it in actual tournaments, in particular at Grand Finals. I'm going to be very interested to see if we see a Storm Scout Sniper in any of these, if there's any strategies that I don't know about, for example. Potentially the team from Misty Meadows, since there's 12 safes here, and they might be able to get enough to actually go and then rotate past it to pick it up. But we will find out when it comes to the finals what the teams are doing. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I've been Reisshub. Peace!